In this video, we have the patch 5.10 tier list. We've officially hit the midpoint of Act 3, and we've gotten a couple of agent changes with the new patch 5.10. So now it's time to see where the agents rank on our newest tier list. What's going on, guys? It's your host Sergeant Frost, and today we have the 5.10 agent tier list. But before we hop into the tier list, let's talk about something you should know that will help you improve your game. Be sure to check out our website for the very best coaching from top-ranked coaches today. The link is in the description if you are interested. Now, let's start off with the S tier. At the top of our tier list once again is the Sentinel Chamber. He's getting a slight bump up this week due to the Fade nerfs that coincided with this patch, which allowed for a small S tier rank shifting. But nonetheless, Chamber is still a menace in the current meta. When you boil it down, Chamber is remaining in the S tier because of two big reasons. One, he is extremely safe to play because of the mobility with his teleport, and his tripwires allow him to always have something watching his back. And the second big reason is due to how scary he is to fight because of his playstyle and both of his powerful guns. When you have an agent who can willingly play aggressive and with confidence because he has two guns that can one-shot you from long range, and he has a safe way to get out if he gets confronted, you have an agent that enables players with aggressive playstyles to shine and be rewarded for their good play. And that is the reason why Chamber will stay in the S tier for the time being. In second place in the S tier this patch is Fade, coming off a couple of fresh nerfs. With this patch, Fade got her prowlers slightly nerfed to make them easier to fight against, and she got her ult point cost increased so that Fade mains get it less frequently. While Riot tried their best to change Fade in a way where she could be powerful but not OP, these Fade nerfs won't affect her enough to a point where she's not viable. In fact, she's still going to be arguably the best initiator out right now, and that's because the main purpose of her kit, which is info gathering, was largely left untouched. Her eye is still the same, and her ultimate and prowlers still work the same. They have just been slightly tweaked for balance purposes. All in all, don't panic. Fade is still a dominant initiator in the meta and is going to take more than a couple of sets of nerfs to bring her out of the meta. Why is Viper still in the S tier, you may ask? Well, no other wall character is doing too well right now. Harbor is not in good enough shape to take her spot in the meta in any way, shape, or form, and we'll get more into that in Harbor's section. But right now, Viper being the best niche controller pick for her dominant maps allows her to be at the top of the meta. Her wall is the most effective way to block vision on larger maps, and considering most of the post-launch maps have been on the bigger side, it's only fitting that Viper would slowly carve out her own map meta and be the go-to pick on said maps. Also, as a controller agent, Viper has a lot of CC and damage in her kit, which allows her to not only have good map presence in game, but also have good kill pressure too. Viper is a solidified S tier pick for the time being. So what's the deal with Raze and why is she appearing in S tier for the first time in a very long time? Well, she's becoming more and more the duelist that you'd want to have on a team comp. Currently, Raze has the kit that's required to take advantage of all the agents right now. For example, Jett is more suitable to rush things and disrupt, but she doesn't have the ability to capitalize off initiator utility. Raze, on the other hand, has abilities that synergizes really well with other CC-infused agents in the meta. A great example is using her nade or ultimate on enemies that get CC'd by her teammates. The fact that there is more breakable utility in the front lines right now means Raze's util is by virtue stronger because she can throw out her util to get information and still deal damage and disrupt. In some situations, she can function like a semi-initiator that can get info with her boombot, and she can still play like a fast duelist by blast packing into sight and using her ultimate and nade to nuke small areas of the map with damage. Raze is a bona fide S tier duelist right now that is deserving of her spot. Atop the A tier in 5.10 is our favorite suppression-based friend KO. KO has a unique spot in the meta right now, where he's quickly becoming a must pick because playing without him in a team comp not only feels weird but almost unproductive. Not having access to his suppression tools can make attacking on some maps feel like a chore, and not having an agent with arguably some of the best flashes in the game can make entering onto sites a bit more difficult than some would like to admit. But nonetheless, KO is in the A tier because the game's community has come to the realization that it is much better to have a team comp with a KO rather than without. Not having access to some of his abilities makes playing the game harder in more ways than one, and that's why he's at the top of the A tier. Next up in the A tier is Jett. Jett is a jack-of-all-trades duelist that can do many things, but she can't specialize in one. Well, at least not really. And that's mainly because other agents can do it better. If you need an AWP, bring Chamber. If you need a speed duelist that can run into a site at Mach 2, then bring Neon and Raze. If you need an agent that can create chaos and get in people's faces, then bring Yoru. Jett's in a weird spot where she's a good agent that's reliable, but if you want to focus on one certain aspect or style of play, there is another agent that can do it better. Jett is worth picking up if you're good with her or just love playing her. But if you want to specialize and focus on an area of your game that suits you better, there are other options besides her in the current meta. Trailing Jett in the A tier is another explosive, may I say fiery duelist, and that's Phoenix. It's worth saying that earlier this year, Phoenix was a joke of a duelist that was outshined by every other agent in the class. But it only took a couple of simple small buffs to allow him to rocket out of the C tier and now back into the A tier. His flash buff, wall buff, and ultimate buff made Phoenix feel alive again in game. His kill pressure just off his flashes alone make him worth picking because he can generate a ton of pressure where he uses these things at the perfect time. Not to mention his ultimate is the perfect tool a duelist would want to crack open a bomb site too. Omen is an A tier because he is simple and reliable. He's an agent whose kit is so straightforward you could trust a player of any skill level to take over the smokes role with him and they will be able to effectively do their job. Omen also has great mobility with Shadow Step and his ultimate that almost allows him to play like a duelist because he is able to juke people out and navigate the map in quick and clever ways. Brimstone and Astra aren't in the best of spots right now as standard controllers, so filling on Omen if you aren't a smokes main is a great choice to pick. Neon is similar to Yoru in a way where a Neon main will be able to dominate games with her, but novice players or people who don't main Neon won't be able to have the same effect on her. This is why she is considered a good duelist, but not one that the general public will be able to pick up and use on a whim. Neon needs to understand rotate paths, how to create timings with her abilities, how to position her wall effectively, when and where to use her stuns to guarantee hits on people, and there's a lot more. There's a whole lot that goes into making Neon a good agent that's worthy of being picked in the meta. And honestly, if you're not as experienced with her, you're better off on Jet or Raze if you're looking for speed. Sova went from an S tier pick earlier this year to barely a bottom A tier pick simply because Fade does his job but better on smaller maps. In comparison, Fade is a more active info gatherer that can use her abilities on the fly without taking her out of the action with her team. She can throw her abilities out while running into a site with her team and not miss a beat. Sova, on the other hand, is a more passive agent that needs to play behind his team and shoot all of his abilities into a site before he can catch up with his team's push. Sova is still a good info gathering agent in his own right since his playstyle is different from other initiators. The only problem is that there is a lot of variety in the initiator class, which has created competition for him in the meta. Sitting atop the B tier is Reyna. Reyna got a nice quality of life buff to her playstyle with her Leer changes. Her flash is now a centerpiece of her kit that allows her to set herself up to make plays and collect kills, which in turn grants her access to her other abilities, which then allows her to snowball around into a victory. One simple change to an ability completely changed how this agent was able to operate and find success inside of a game, and that's great for her because her rise in viability allowed her to ascend to the top of B tier. Here's the deal with Cypher. Currently, no one except for Cypher mains understand his tripwire changes and how it will make them different. There's a lot more possibility to place his tripwires in more niche places to make them more unpredictable and effective. Right now, Cypher's tripwires are extra strong since it will take a while before the game's community catches up to where Cypher can place his new tripwires. He was so out of the meta that the new buff changes to his tripwires makes it easier to catch people off guard since no one knows what his new meta setups look like at the moment. His ult becoming more useful is also a great thing, because now you can cast his ultimate from a farther, safer distance and you can wait until you're ready now that the time limit has been taken out. Also, now that his ultimate pings twice, it's harder for the enemy team to red light green light his ultimate to fake it out. It gives your team 4 seconds to come up with a plan after the first ping, so that way you can capitalize on the enemy's positions when it pings a second time. If you want an agent that creates chaos and can get in the opponent's faces, Yoru is the agent for you. His kit allows for him to outplay his opponents both mentally and physically. Learning how to set up your clone to divert the enemy's attention, only for you to TP behind them and flash off the wall instantaneously, is a play that no other agent can pull off, but boy is it effective. Yoru is an agent that will take time and effort to learn in order to make him work for you as a viable duelist pick. So if you aren't willing to put in that time, there are other duelists you can use. If you are willing to put in the time though, your investment will pay off handsomely. Brimstone is not in the best of spots right now in the meta. Brim is a great low entry barrier controller for anyone who wants to get into smoking, or if you were just the unlucky last pick and you need a fill for smokes. His kit can suffice as his smokes are long lasting and not hollow, so they can get the vision blocking job done. However, if you have the choice or chance to just play Omen or Viper depending on the map, it's a much better alternative option to pick them rather than Brim who lacks versatility in his kit. Skye got buffs a few patches ago, but she still hasn't been able to crack into the top of the initiator meta, especially since Fade and KO are hogging the top 2 spots. Thus, this makes Skye an alternative option that isn't seeing as much play as she used to. Her issues now compared to the past is that she has to play as a team-focused initiator instead of a hybrid duelist that just goes around pop flashing and dogging for herself. You need to play her in the role the devs intended for her in order to see success with the agent. Despite what many people may think with all the Cypher changes going on, KJ is still a formidable sentinel. She's not as focused on info gathering like Cypher is. She's more of a sight denier and flank watcher that kind of wants to be stationary around her abilities. She's not as mobile as Chamber, so she's left playing as a sight anchor role that sits in the back of sight and holds an angle waiting for the enemies to walk into her setup. This is a viable playstyle for KJ that works relatively well on maps like Ascent, Haven, and Split for example. The only problem is that she's not getting the pick rate that she deserves because of Chamber's prowess, and now the Cypher buffs that will most likely make him a flavor of the month agent for a short period of time. Astra's at the bottom of B tier because she is still only viable on Pearl in the current meta. she doesn't bring enough to the table as a controller anymore to reliably be main smokes for a team comp. Unfortunately, too many nerfs back-to-back can send an agent into the pits of mediocrity, and that unfortunately has happened for Astra after the mega nerf she received in episode 4 this year. If we're being honest, Sage is the kind of pick that people who are really passive play or people that are duelists that just want to have their own heals. She is a good agent in general situations, but she doesn't have many really good specialized uses. She's never really the answer to a team comp's problems because she doesn't have a defining reason for why she should be picked on a map. She used to have a specific meta on the map Icebox, where she would wall tube and play around mid to control the flow of the map, but the meta changed and she's no longer a priority on that map anymore. She is in a weird place where she can be used in solo queue to help heal and revive in order to support your team, but the game's meta requires more from an agent than just using an ultimate once every few rounds in order to have impact for your team. Breach's utility is strong in his own right, but it does require a lot of team coordination, and it's balanced around the fact that Breach can't play around his own utility easy. So with harder competition, it's harder for him to capitalize off his own opportunities. His util is also very positioning dependent, which means it's really hard to play him well if your team is not on the same page before and during your utility. Harbor now has more utility with a second cascade. The second cascade does help him because it gives him a bit of an initiator capability since he can create more space. The main problem is that he doesn't fit into a system right now, in the sense that he can't fit into the current meta and find a role that fits him. The meta right now is double initiator, which means it's hard for Harbor to find his way into a team comp and contribute without taking a spot away from an agent that's most likely deserved it more. We don't know if it's going to take a meta shift or several bigger buffs in order for Harbor to become a meta controller, but right now it's not looking too good for him. And with that being said, that's our patch 5.10 agent tier list. Let us know whether you agree or disagree in the comment section down below. And don't forget to like and consider subscribing. This has been your host Sergeant Frost, and I'll see you all again in the next one.